Bill Carney is a retired police officer. After serving many roles and responding to high-profile events, including both Twin Tower attacks, he ended his career as a crime scene investigator, working on every type of crime you can imagine. When he retired, he was planning to work at Walmart, but after only 2 months, he found himself back in the police force, where he was introduced to Afghanistan by a police advisor. Carney has been working in Afghanistan almost continuously since 2007. During this time, he's worked as a police trainer for the Afghan Police Forces, worked on an investigative team at a detention facility, and helped train Afghan police in investigative work. In this interview, Bill discusses the insights he brings to Robert Bales' case from his work in biometrics on the ground in Afghanistan. Specifically, he will discuss issues surrounding the prosecution witnesses in Bales' trial. What are the circumstances surrounding a village stability platform in Afghanistan?
Let's just picture yourself in a location. The base he's in is probably 50 yards by 50 yards. That includes sleeping locations, showers, if he's got showers. Very, very limited space. I'll give you the example of a location I was at, probably similar. I showered once a week. There were never really any hot meals, so I basically lived on Pop-Tarts, but mostly it was MREs, which is those meals in a box. Let's just put yourself there. Forget about the outside stress with the dangers of mortars, gunfire, IEDs. Let's just put you in that location, isolated, maybe one meal a day, 120 degrees. Bathrooms is basically a spackle. You know what a spackle bucket is? It's a big bucket that they put a plastic bag in, and they have a toilet seat on it, and you go to the bathroom on that. When you're done, you take your bag and you dump it in a hole. So just picture all those dynamics. 120 degrees during the day, maybe 90 at night, no air conditioning, and you got to live like that for 9 months. And that's not counting like I said, the stress of the dangers when you go out. So you just take that stress, try to just do that 24/7 for 8 or 9 months and see how your mind goes. Try to be strong every day. Now put on all of the stress when you leave that front gate, where when you leave, you know that every yard you go, there could be an IED that goes off. You could get hit with machine guns, you can get rocketed, and that's every yard, every mile that you're traveling. And that's in 120-degree heat. And I'm not even talking about when the explosions occur, when the gunfights occur, when the injuries happen, when guys get killed, and that goes every day, especially back in the day when Bob was there. That stuff was happening 24/7. Even when you're trying to sleep, they're rocketing your base. I mean, those are the circumstances he was under. I mean, in the FOBs I was in, we would get rocketed multiple times every night. So your sleep pattern's off, the stress is up, you're not eating right, you stink, you can't wash your clothes. So, I mean, all that stuff you got to take into consideration. And that's on a good day. And then you compound that on if you have some kind of health problems or physical injuries, put that on top of all that stress and dynamics. It's tough. I mean, anywhere you go outside that base, you don't know when you're going to get hit. I'll give you an example. On the FOB I was at, every time we left the base, we hear over the radio, they would overhear the Taliban talking on the radio. So they would have a translator translating what they were talking about. So every time we left that base, we would hear Taliban is saying they see you exiting the base. You're making a right. You're going at least. So they're watching you everywhere. And we're hearing this on the radio. They're watching you. They're watching you. So just hearing that is stressful. So you're waiting because you hear them talking on the radio. So it's a lot of dynamics involved that a lot of people don't understand. And then you put that on top of if I have health problems or if I got hurt or something's not right at home, that factors in. It really affects you. Because one, you're not sleeping right, you're not eating right, you're not showering, you're lucky to get cold water. Your base is a slave to the fuel, to the generators if they're working. And he did this for 4 tours. My first 2 years I did it, we were attacked, but nothing really I was never in an explosion, but many small arms fire, mortar attacks, but nothing like what he's been through. And it's stressful.
So what are biometrics used for in the war in Afghanistan?
The basic foundation for the biometrics was who is who out there in the field. You get to a location, you have no idea who is out there. So anytime you have an encounter, whether it's good or bad, it could be a meet and greet, you have to get the biometrics of everybody you come in contact with. I mean, biometrics is their fingerprints, their DNA, their eye scan, and their photo. Get a profile, so that gets put into the system so it can be retrieved later. The biometrics is a basic battlefield tool, law enforcement tool. It's also used for just backgrounds on if you get A&P and A&A enrolled into the system, so you know exactly who they are. Initially for Afghanistan, it was just who's out in the battlefield, so that if anything happens, whether it's a high-profile event or incident, if there's any evidence, explosives or whatever, hopefully they had their biometrics, meaning fingerprints, DNA, in the system. So when they bring that evidence and they process it and they retrieve fingerprints or DNA, it'll come to a match. Let's just say you have 50 IED components, just say explosive. You process them in a brand new system. You retrieve all these fingerprints and DNA off them. But there's nothing else in the system that matches to those fingerprints because you haven't put anybody in there yet. So now over time, you make these encounters, and this is all over Afghanistan, whether it's good encounters or bad encounters, you enroll these people into the system. So now when these fingerprints and DNA go into the system with these unknown fingerprints, they match if there's anything that matches. That's how it's done.
Can you talk a little bit about how this relates to Bob's case specifically with the testimonies and the witnesses that were flown in?
Usually when I look at a case, it's not so much what I'm reading, but what I'm not reading, what's not there. You know what I mean? So when I'm looking at the case, we know what happened that night, but when they talk about the witnesses, I'm saying I don't see any backgrounds on the witnesses. I said to John, I said, we don't have anything on the witnesses. He goes, well, they're not providing it. I says, well, you know what we can do is, I have this Excel sheet. We could do the 5 W's on people with the similar names as the witnesses and come up with a picture of what the backgrounds might be if they had done the records check, which I think they did, but just didn't disclose it. So we came up with a background on all the witnesses as close as we could come. Now remember, we did not get their biometrics. You know what I mean? I did not physically get their fingerprints. I did not physically get their DNA. So I don't know 100% who they are because they didn't give me the report. I'm going on a filtered search on people with the same names, same area, same date, same place of occurrence of IED events. For me, if somebody doesn't produce something to me, there's got to be a reason why.
Right.
If the proper procedure was done and backgrounds were done correctly, if nothing came back and they were clean, you have to provide that. Or we found some derogatory, this is what we found, blah, 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 here it is. Great. But John never got anything in regards to the exact biometrics from those witnesses. I had just put in a filter of in and around the Panjwai district. The search I had was IED activity. And like I said before, most guys that I've dealt with in the ID business, you're in the drug business, you're in the guns business, you're in the weapons business. They're all in the same networks. Now, again, not 100%, but it's the picture we wanted to present to say, this is what we think would have came up if a proper background check was done. All we want to know is, what is the background check? But
Were you sure about at least one of them because of a tattoo on their hand?
That was taken from an interview after the incident, and they caught the photo of his tattoo on his hand. And that's a legitimate Taliban tattoo. Why it wasn't addressed during that interview, I don't know. Why that wasn't addressed in the courtroom, I don't know. I mean, that would be one of my questions. Can you explain a tattoo on your hand? What we think with our initial search, they were affiliated with IED events, which tends to be affiliated with the Taliban. Now understand this, for them to come to the United States, they have to do a full biometrics and background check on these individuals. They have to. Right. So, if, like I said, if everything was clean, there was no records, why not turn it over? That box is checked, move on. But if something derogatory came off, that's fine too. They should just provide it, but they didn't. There's a very good possibility that these guys were involved. If they weren't, prove us wrong. When you're the defense, you don't have to be 100% right. That's the prosecutor's job. Defense does not have to be. We can say, we think these 10 guys are straight up Taliban, and this is why. Prove us wrong.
So why do you think the president should consider commuting Robert Bales' sentence?
To me personally, my first reaction would be just look at the case as a whole. There's so many inconsistencies, and there's a lot of line of efforts, and I mean a lot of avenues that John and the team are going at. Is, the health, the methylquin, so many other things that I don't think were addressed in the initial trial. You read it and you say, what? It didn't make sense. And I only can speak as an investigator because that's who I am. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a doctor. You don't look at someone or an investigation as who's guilty or innocent. You just look to see the facts. The facts will tell you, or what's not there. I mean, that'll tell you too. And let's put it this way. It wasn't a prosecutable case with what they came up with. And I don't think Bob had good counsel recommending some of the things he agreed to do. I just don't think he got a full review of his case. And I think he deserves for what he's given back. I think he deserves that at least. I met Bob twice. First time was, I believe it was like August 2015. The next one was December of 2018. And the first time I met him, you could tell he was emotional. Looked me right in the eye, acknowledged everything, straightforward with everything. The entire time I was there, he was laser locked looking at me. But I had brought with me some training documents that I had done years ago on high-profile figures in Kandahar. And the documents were just IED guys that were connected with the same cases. And I would show those to my Afghan investigator, say, if you do the proper work on this guy, you'll see that he's involved with everybody else. So there were about 29 guys on these 3 pieces of paper. And I said, John, let me bring these in and show Bob. I'll bet you he knows some of these guys. So I brought that with me the first time, and I gave it to him. I said, Bob, I thought you should notice. He looked at it, and tears came to his eyes because he recognized some of the people. And I think it kind of affirmed that he wasn't out of his mind when he thought the bad guys were out there, because here's a stranger coming in and said, Bob, I just want you to look at some of the guys we looked at in the same area. And when he saw those pictures, it could say life came back into his body. Like he wasn't all in his mind that these bad guys were out there.
How could Bales have known that these were bad guys, that there were bad guys out there?
Remember when you asked about how was biometrics used in the war? Bob goes out of his base, went out every day, sometimes 2 times a day. And you're running into groups of people. You want to know who they are. It's like a cop. Like when I was a cop, a foot cop. I walk around my beat. I know everybody out there, whether they're bad or good. I've run into them every day. Right. Same thing with Bob. He's out there doing missions, trying to get as many people into the system for biometrics. So he's out there like a street cop. He knows everybody out. So when I gave him those photos, and I think that reassured him that he wasn't crazy. He knew he was surrounded by bad guys, which we all knew. We're all surrounded by bad guys when you're assigned here. So I hope that answers your question, how he knew it. He's out there every day. He's a street cop in an Army uniform.
Do you think that Bales received a fair trial given the methylquin and the biometrics?
No, definitely not. The methylquin thing, I don't even think it was addressed properly, I'll say that. The biometrics, like I say, it just shows the whole incompetence of the trial. Either they're very stupid and they just didn't know what they were doing, or they're just keeping information back. So the biometrics is a side thing. The main thing is the methylquin, Bob's health. He's had 4 tours, injured, so he definitely didn't get a fair trial. No way. You know, I often think, and I think I'm guilty of it too, but I see it in the military because I've been here so long, is that we take care of machinery like helicopters, planes, better than we do ourselves. Like when I want to go on a mission, to take a flight somewhere, I'll go to our travel, and they'll say, well, the helicopters are down. I go, why? He goes, well, they hit their hours. We don't want to overdo them. So they got to be down, maintenance, they got to be down for at least a week. I don't think they did that with Bob Bales. I think they should have looked at Bob Bales and said, he needs a little downtime before each of those deployments. Should we send this guy out? I don't know, let's look at it. You know, I don't think that was even addressed.
I also heard that the day before the event, he was hacking away at a tree the entire day.
Yes, I had heard that. I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember he brought that up too. So I said, Bob, didn't you have anybody to talk to? Did anybody ever observe you doing that, or anything else that might have been like out of ordinary? Say, Bob, let's take a knee. Let's go ahead and drink some water. Why don't you just take a break for a couple of days? He goes, I had nobody. He told me, he said, I had nobody to talk to. So I just think it was nobody stepped up and shut him down. You know, shut him down in a good way for his own good. So I remember asking him that question. He looked at me straight in the eye and said, I had nobody.
And I heard that he actually went to the commanding officers at his base, and he was telling them, I think there are bad guys out there who are going to come kill us. And they just kind of dismissed him. Yeah,
I remember him saying that after I showed him those photos. Maybe just one of those officer type situations where they just dismissed the soldier and said, yeah, I know. And they may be believing him, but yeah, I know. You know, and it's unfortunate, but that first meeting was, I know it was emotional for Bob, and it was eye-opening for me. And the second time that I saw Bob in December of 18, he started crying when he saw me, because he wanted to thank me for reassuring that he wasn't going completely out of his mind about the guys that are in the air. Finally, somebody other than himself knew they were out there. Second was very emotional on his part, still very laser focused with eye-to-eye contact with me, and acknowledges everything. He doesn't deny anything. Yeah. So as far as the president goes, I would say, Mr. President, you got to look at this case from page 1 till you close the book. Why did it happen, and how did it happen? That's the question of the whole trial, is how did this happen? And I don't even think they came near addressing it. So like I said, if I was sitting here with the president, I would say, have your security team take time, go from page 1 to the end of that novel, and you'll be scratching your head many times through it. And, you know, it's just not right. Look at the facts, look what's there, look what's not there. Remember, look what's not there, and then draw your conclusions. And then compare it to what was done, and I think it'll be clear.
Do you believe that Bob Bales had any intent to kill anyone who wasn't a bad guy, so to say?
No, not at all. I think there was so many dynamics that was going on with him. He wasn't himself, wasn't right mind. And I don't think they addressed that. They should be asking that. Well, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Let's figure it out. If a helicopter crashed here tomorrow, first thing they do is, why did this happen? How did this happen? Oh, there was a part that was broke, a part was missing. I don't think they look see what parts were broken with Bob Bales. And the other thing that's really important here, you got to remember, Afghanistan at that time and even now, very political. So a lot of decisions are made because of that. Not because of what's legally right and wrong. It's what's politically can keep things level. That was a big factor what was going on there.
So they sort of treated Bob as this fluke rarity instead of his case as a symptom of larger problems with the system and with how they treat people like you and people who work for our country and protect our country.
I don't believe anything is intentional. I think it's part of the machine, and we're all part of the machine. more so on the military side. So I think things tend to fly by the wayside just as long as that machine keeps rolling. And then once things happen, then you got to go into the protect mode, I believe. You know, when they say that the cover up is always worse than the crime. You know, we know what happened that night, terrible thing that happened, but let's treat it for what it was. Why did it happen? How did it happen? And everything around it. If you've got people involved as far as witnesses, victims, let's know about them. I think Bob needs a fair shake here.
Seems like he definitely did not get to tell his story, also under the threat of the death penalty, which of course scared him and his family.
Well, yeah, and you know what? Was he Bob Bales, the same Bob Bales I talked to the last couple of years at that point? Was he in the position to make those kind of decisions at that time?
Yeah.
I think Bob Bales today would have said, put everything in. I don't care about the death penalty. I wanted my story to be out there.
That was Bill Carney's take on Robert Bales' case. Check back soon for more interviews with other experts involved in this extremely complicated and tragic case.